be going over some fun UAL JSON parsing with PowerShell. Ultimately, our goal is to pull data from Purview, Microsoft Purview, which is a data-centric utility designed to pull information from the entire environment, right? Where something like sign-in logs and some of the other ones. Let's actually take a look at that really briefly. When you go into Microsoft Entra, you get some really basic sign-in logs underneath monitoring. You have audit logs, provisioning logs, some other stuff, but these are all kind of all over the place. They're specific, but they only show certain things. The reason why I'm kind of bringing this up today and why I think this is an important discussion is because in a real world engagement, um, I found that these sign-in logs and audit logs and provisioning logs just really weren't enough, right? And they're also in 3 separate locations. So going into each one, having 3 open tabs, searching for things across those log interfaces, not great. It's not a great experience. There's better ways to do it. And during a real incident response, a real IR for a client that I had over the weekend a month and a half ago or so, I ran into that issue, right? I was trying to figure out, how do I know what actually happened? How can I determine what really occurred? And then I found out about the Purview UAL, or Unified Access Logs, and that's exactly what they are. If we go to Purview, we'll kind of walk through the entire process here. Purview.microsoft.com is the home of Purview. You have access to this if you have Business Premium or E3. However, E5 is better. There's longer retention, just better stuff in general. An E5 license is probably recommended for this in terms of especially long-term retention and being able to look into the past, which is kind of the point of Purview. It does a whole lot. Don't let me lie here and say I know everything about Purview. But there's definitely a lot of things. You can see all the different tasks that it has down here: DLP, insider risk, information protection, sensitivity, labels, and the like. It's all great for data security. But one of the best things about it is this audit log, at least, again, from my perspective, right? As a cybersecurity professional, real world, this is the type of stuff that I'm interested in, because essentially these logs, these unified access logs, or UAL, is designed specifically um, to store everything. It's not just logins. It's not just Exchange. It's not just Entra, previously known as Azure Active Directory. It is all of them combined. So when you're thinking about, like, well, an attacker gained access to our environment, they have access. What did they do, and in what order did they do it in? Sign-in logs are not good enough for that, right? At all. It doesn't provide that level of context. You can see, like, oh, they signed in, and then you can go try to figure out what they did, but how are you going to do that? Right? It's not a straightforward methodology. You kind of have to click all around. I was literally going into different interfaces, especially Exchange, and just trying to see, like, hey, did anything change? There's Exchange logging, of course, that you can pull and look into. But again, Purview stores all of it, all in one place. Now, I got, got a couple things to say about the interface and how it operates and whether or not it's any good. And there's a couple things I'm like, Purview is a newer landing page. There's a couple things about Purview that is interesting in terms of its design. One of the ways that it works is um, it is a logging interface that is queued. It's a queued service is what this is called. So as opposed to sign-in logs, where you just go here, and I'll just show it briefly, you just pull it up and it just has access, right? It's just right there. That's not how this works, okay? So we're gonna create one here, and this is just kind of I'm gonna go through most of the motions real world, but I have a couple things already downloaded that I'll be using for the delivery. Generally, the way this works is you request it, and the easiest way to do it is just to pull everything during a certain time period. So May 12th to May 16th, just the last week or so, and you just say search, right? Now, if you didn't notice, nothing happened for a second. That's normal. That's kind of what I'm talking about. The interface is a little bit interesting in the way that it functions. You can see now that it is queued. So it's not going to happen instantly. It's also not going to happen very quickly. You can see that the last one, which is only 4 days, 5 days or so, took 21 minutes for 1,500 logs. Now, I assume it's because, again, it's a queued service. This is not designed to be like instantly accessible. It's just not designed that way. This is more of a data person's utility for of course performing audits across the environment, or a cybersecurity person's utility to try to understand what happened during an instant response. So it's not designed to be quick. It's not high performance. None of that is built into the model of Purview. That's not its design. So important to understand that. When this actually completes, there's also another interesting portion about this. You don't just get the information. It says that it'll just pop up and just start the download. That is, at least from what I've seen, just factually not how it works. Once it completes, and really, other than refreshing, right? You can refresh the page or you can refresh right here. This does not update live. So again, not a high performance utility. That's not its design. As soon as this completes to 100, you can go in and download it, right? You can click into it and download. This is the one that I did before. So what's weird about this is that it'll tell you, right? Let's go look at the one that hasn't completed yet. So this one hasn't actually found anything yet, but still going. Well, see, again, what does this mean? Total result count, and then it's still showing me stuff. Whenever it's about to be complete, you'll get this export button. When you click the export button, that is also a queued service. So there are 2 steps in this process. This part will also take additional time. It'll tell you, hey, it'll download whenever it's ready. It'll just start immediately downloading. Also not factually correct. That's also not how it works. You have to refresh the page because, as you can see, there is no refresh button on this page anywhere. So you have to go in and actually click refresh on the web page. Then the export function will allow you to download. There'll actually be a little button right here that allows you to download. Okay. Again, that's just kind of how it works generally. Oops, you see now it's finding stuff. But whenever it's complete, it looks like so. You'll get this little button here, and you can click downloads file, and it'll download to your downloads. And that's when you get the output is a CSV. So I'll just kind of show you generally the CSV comes out with just this random string here. You can rename it if you want. But this is essentially the data output from the Purview UAL export. Okay, so of course it stores a whole lot of information, right? Every record has its own ID number. There's creation dates, there's record types, there's operations. What was it doing? Who did it happen from? What is actually going on, right? And what we're going to focus on is this column here. The audit data column is essentially all this data that you see here on the screen. All of that is actually in that column, the audit data column. If anyone can, can see and recognize, it's also all in JSON. So, fun, data people are going to be like, nice. Everyone else might be like, who cares, right? What does that mean to me? JSON is something that I'm still kind of new to. I think most data people would already be on top of this, but JSON is very good in terms of a data set. It's extremely easy to manipulate, and not only manipulate like with with for loops and if statements and things like that, but also on the fly. So this is basically what I was doing real world, as I was interacting with UAL logs and interacting with them on the fly, and so that's what we're going to do. So Just generally speaking, one of the first ways that we're going to start this process here is with an import statement, right? We're essentially going to, and I'll just make this full screen here. Let me make it a little bit bigger. Oops. So these UAL logs, what's cool about, again, PowerShell, and again, everyone who, if you have any experience with PowerShell, you're probably already aware of this, but you could very easily import data sets into PowerShell and then just assign them a variable, right? So makes it super easy because once it's assigned a variable, then I can just interact with it, right? If I call the UAL logs, right, then I get all of that data, right? And now since it's just in memory, I can just manipulate it on the fly. I'm not having to read from the CSV. It is just in memory as this $UAL logs variable. So I can do that at any moment, right? Whenever we're interacting with these logs, it's also very simple, right? I can call the first log, right? This is an array. So I can call the first log, which again, computers start counting at 0. I can call the second log, and so on, right? So very simple way to interact with this data as it gets pulled out of the CSV. And of course, this is kind of just the beginning, right? Of course, there's a lot more to it. This is going to be a very simple walkthrough in terms of what's possible, what it's capable of, etc. So again, if you're a data scientist, this might all be a little bit beneath you, but we're just keeping it simple, right? Another thing I like to do is just create a secondary variable. The reason I do this is because only one of those data sets, only one of those columns is the true JSON, the JSON that we really care about. So we're basically going to create another log here, and that column is known as audit data. Okay, and then we just have to say convert from JSON. So this basically, again, it's not going to give us any output because this is a change, right? Whenever we are setting something, we don't expect output there. But now instead of calling $UAL logs, we're going to call $audit. And these audit logs, again, are all of the JSON coming out of that audit data. And again, same process here, right? We can call the first log. We can call the second, right? We can call the third. And again, this just makes it very simple to interact with and, again, pull additional data from. And that's kind of the overall goal here. We're not just going to be reading the logs directly. Of course, that could be useful. You could use it to just peruse. And this is everything in 365. It's not just sign-in logs, not just provisioning logs. This is everything that has occurred, at least within our scope of time. So in order to, let's say that we're interested to see, maybe our search was a little bit more specific and it was about a specific user, right? So all the data is already set to that user. Cool. What was that user doing during a certain time period? We could easily say something like workload. And again, this is kind of the beauty of PowerShell is that, and JSON really, is that all I have to say is dot and then the parameter name. And it pulls that parameter out of every log source. Right? So each of those, right, the array 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all of those different logs all have these parameters in them, or at least most of them do. And I can pull all of them instantly from each log. Right. So again, if I was interested to see, what was that user doing between a certain time period, this would be a very easy way to do that. Okay, so we'll just pull another one. Again, it's just good to have a frame of reference. This is our entire data set. So this allows me to say, okay, well, what's interesting, right? So maybe we could say, I don't know, user ID, right? Maybe we're interested in seeing all the different users during a certain space, a certain time period. Maybe we're interested in seeing the operation. So what was actually performed, right? What operations did that user perform during a certain time period? Again, this is a very basic way of looking at things. You kind of have to maybe dive a little bit deeper into each of these, but you could see, right? A couple of those things have the term set at the beginning. So again, it wouldn't be too much further to be like, well, let's run what? Can I actually use grep here? That would be cool. So I think I may have to do find string since we're on Windows. So if I kind of knew what I was looking for, I could even further parse the output and determine if the user did any set commands, right? If they performed any types of operations that would be, that would be problematic, right? Maybe I care about email, um, mail, right? Okay, has to be uppercase. There we go. So, maybe there's something about mail. Maybe I'm interested in that. This allows me to further parse the output and kind of look for things. So again, this is all designed to be on the fly. I'm not teaching, super complicated for loops or if statements or anything here. This is all designed to be interacted with on the fly, as if you were at the terminal, as if you were on an incident response. How do we actually perform all these operations, right? This is kind of the idea. So I think one of the coolest parts about this is that I can do things like IP addresses, right? Because each of these logs store IPs. So real world, you might do something like this and be like, okay, so let's just kind of get it all out there. And then we just kind of scroll through. We say, is there anything that looks like it stands out? Anything that I don't expect to see? Maybe I have some whitelisted IP addresses. I know where my clients are normally logging in from, but this one stands out as weird. I think that this one might be malicious because my clients do not come from this IP address, right? That is not where they are designed to show up from, right? Their named location or something like that is not this location, right? It's something different. I think my IP address is a 47. So I see my login and I see an 84 and I'm like, that's weird, right? So maybe we're like, all right, let's just take a look at all of the client IP address. Oops, gotta spell it right. Okay, so again, this is all the IP addresses for all the users, right? So again, this is just generally across the board. Remember, you could search specifically for users in the UAL logs themselves. You could also write some loops here to pull out only certain user accounts. That is possible. But again, this is just all actions across the entire 365 environment from all users, and this is all IP addresses performing those actions. So this is unified access logs. That's exactly what this is. This is a unified view of all the operations in your environment. Again, from a blue team perspective, an IR perspective, incident response, this is pretty awesome. And then I'm able to do this on the fly with almost zero effort is pretty cool. Right, that's kind of the idea of this. I was using this in a real world situation. I was able to pull and parse data very quickly with this. It was much easier than the sign-in logs. Sign-in logs they just don't show all the information, right? And I was able to find out some exchange changes that were made that I wouldn't have seen without these logs. I had looked in Exchange. I did not see those changes in Exchange directly. So we're going to go a little bit more into detail here. All right, this next step is essentially as far as I'm going to take it from a technical perspective. We'll have a couple other conversations after, but this is generally about as far as it goes. Okay, so again, this one for me, this is the part that's more confusing, but it's not too bad. All right, again, if you know PowerShell, this will be pretty common. This is going to be a very, very basic if statement. All right. Again, you can normally write out PowerShell scripts and they're all in their own lines. These are known as one-liners. So I'm not doing anything too difficult. And again, I can do it on the fly, right in the terminal as I'm going through the process. I'm going to throw in that IP address, which I think was this guy. And then we're just going to say, and I'll walk you through the code here. So this is just taking the same data that we've been interacting with. Then we're just saying for every single object, which is every whenever we say audit 0, audit 1, that is each object. We're saying if that object right? Because that we're just calling each individual object. This is like if you were saying make every object X, that's essentially what PowerShell does here. So $_ is essentially X, each object's client IP address parameter. If that client IP address equals that IP, then I want to see it, right? Then I want you to output that information. So again, very basic syntax here. I'm sure you can go a whole lot further than this, but again, what this allows me to do is to only show all of the logs, each of the objects within this UAL log within the audit data column that has that IP address. Right? So again, if I thought that that was malicious, I could instantly, almost instantly, right? Takes a little bit of syntax here at this point, but I could almost instantly pull every log source or everything that happened um, with a single command. So I can see all the things that occurred from that weird IP address if I thought this IP address was weird, right? So again, makes it very simple to go through and pull that data on the fly. Again, this can get way more complicated. You know, you could do multiple if statements. You could parse all the data from a particular um, you know, a particular user or a particular IP address, right? And maybe let's do that. So we'll do this again, and we'll just say mal IP, so malicious IP, right? So essentially, we're going to set this output that we just pulled, which is, you know, all the malicious IP output, as a variable. Right? So again, we don't expect to have any output there, but when I call mal IP, I already have just that data set. So now I can manipulate this data set even further, and I can say, okay, well, what were all the workloads for all those malicious, potentially malicious situations, right? They're all in Exchange. Okay. Maybe that's information that matters to me. Okay. Well, what were all the operations? So now I can see specifically, and this is this is all just me reading my emails essentially. This allows me to see all of the operations that malicious IP, potentially malicious IP, because I think this is really just one of mine, potentially malicious IP performed, right? So every operation that one actually went out and performed. I can also see the date, right? I could pull creation time. See if I can spell, right? So again, this is just a very basic way to be able to interact with these logs that I could teach anybody, right? You don't have to be a wizard, a data wizard, a PowerShell wizard, or anything like that to perform all these operations in any way, shape, or form. And again, that's kind of the beauty of it. This is why I thought this was interesting because I didn't know anything about any of this when I first pulled all this up, and I was able to instantly understand it. Right? It wasn't complicated. PowerShell makes parsing JSON super easy, and by pulling data sets and then assigning them to new variables, I can just continuously access those variables, parse those variables out, and see if I can pull anything else that might be interesting, right? Like maybe I care about the client info string, right? Whenever your device makes a request, it denotes who it is. And so you can see this one is Outlook on Android, right? What if this user doesn't have an Android phone? Right, you'd be able to tell that very quickly. And again, this is kind of the whole point. Being able to pull and parse this data as needed on the fly. Again, this is what it starts out as. If you're good with CSVs, maybe this is a simple approach for you. Fair enough, okay. But to me, being able to contextualize, parse, learn, but I'm basically analyzing these logs just on the fly, just for whatever comes to mind, whatever pops up, whatever I see that might be interesting or look like it might be malicious. This is a great way to interact with it, right? So again, starting from Purview, right, knowing nothing, we're at a point where we can go in, pull data. Let's see if this one's even done yet. Did it complete? Okay, it did finally complete, and that was much quicker, even though it's the same data set, it looks like. So again, It's not too bad. The interface is a little bit clunky, right? I think that Microsoft is honestly working on it. I'll be completely honest. It feels better than it did even 2 months ago. It feels a little bit. It reacts quicker. It seems like so. It's still a newer interface. Purview replaced the Compliance Center. If anyone was familiar with any of that, and so it's a newer interface. So there's going to be some clunkiness with it, but it seems to be improving. And overall, again, though the output is not super simple to understand, once you realize the power of PowerShell, especially when interacting with JSON, this becomes a much easier time. The JSON is very simple to navigate. Again, for someone who's not a data expert, I do not proclaim to be a data scientist or anything like that. This is so simple that I can understand it. And again, if I can do it and do it on a whim randomly, again in a situation where I needed it, then almost anybody can. Because again, I don't understand JSON really. PowerShell is still kind of new to me to a degree, but again, if these processes here make it super simple, right? So that's kind of the major delivery in terms of the point, why we're talking about it. This allows anybody, SOC analyst. I'm technically a cybersecurity consultant at ProArch, so I was on that IR as an escalation, and this was completely new to me then. Now it's something that I think a lot of people should at least hear about. Because I'm not sure everyone knows about this. I literally spoke to my boss recently and said, "Hey, I'm doing this talk. It'll be really cool." And he was like, "Oh, what are you going to talk about?" I'm like, "Yeah, parsing UAL JSON with PowerShell." He's like, "What's UAL?" So this is still a fairly new topic in terms of, I think a lot of people in the industry don't fully grasp that this is really, though it's like an auditor tool, that's its design. It's a fantastic cybersecurity tool. Fantastic. Because again, I can pull data across the entire environment. Again, it's not just sign-in logs. This is Exchange, right? This is SharePoint, OneDrive, the entire Entra. Everything that you can think of in 365 is going to be stored in these unified access logs. Again, a fantastic addition to the 365 suite. Does require some additional licensing like we talked about, but is pretty tough to beat. Um, in terms of IR, I've never really heard of anything this good outside of a full-blown SOC seam that's storing all this data. And even then, going to a SOC and pulling data from it, or going to a seam and pulling data from it isn't this easy. You have to learn a bunch of complicated syntax. At a minimum, with Sentinel, you got to learn KQL. So if you don't know KQL, that's going to be hard. You got to learn the syntax and all that for that. Whereas this, I think, seriously is easier. Though the CSV is complicated, looks complicated at least. All of the JSON in the audit data column is very simple to interact with. Once you learn how to kind of interact with the data like so. Again, let's see. Yeah, here I'll just post this here. I'll just move this over. So this is kind of the idea, right? This is the general process that we went through. We pull all the data, we import the CSV into a variable, we interact with the variable, we pull the audit data column out of it, we convert it. It says convert from JSON, um, so that it can be easily readable, and then we can interact with that audit data column very simply, right? Pulling all the parameters out, and then further we can take that data, search for things that are specific, right? So here I'm looking for a specific client IP, saying if it equals that IP address, I want to see it. And then if you want, right, you can just add whatever it is at the beginning. And now this is your new variable that you can interact with, and do the exact same process, right? Something like operation. This is the easiest way to interact with data that I have ever heard of. Again, I used to not be a super big proponent of JSON, like I didn't fully grasp it and understand it. And now after learning how the UAL logs are are situated, set up, configured, and how simple PowerShell is to interact with that JSON and those parameters. This is one of the easiest ways to get started with with data science. I mean, at a minimum, cybersecurity in 365, right? So any SOC analyst or anyone out there who's looking to grasp this a little bit better, this is a really good way of going about it. The only thing easier than this is Bash, right? Being able to awk and grep and things like that on Linux terminal is super simple once you get the hang of it, but you have to learn that too. I mean, there's not much learning going on here. It's pretty straightforward. You pull it directly from the data that you see on the screen, and outside of pulling up PowerShell and downloading a CSV, that's about all there is to it. This is one of the simplest ways to get started. And again, if anyone has any questions about that, feel free to reach out to JN Training, right? Feel free to reach out to ProArch, right? We can provide information for you in terms of whatever you're looking to do. And again, that's the delivery. My name is Logan Hillard. Thank you for stopping by. And again, this message has been brought to you by JN Training and ProArch. Appreciate it. All right, there it is. Delivery complete.
Thanks a lot.
Want to thank
Appreciate it,
those
Logan.
sponsors.
Thank you very
thanks.
much.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thank you for doing this on